Hey everybody, welcome to RunLeadGen Radio, your go-to podcast for all things digital marketing, SEO, and growing your business with your hosts, Quinn
and Brian.
In today's episode, we have a really juicy topic. It's all about the Google leak.
Yeah, so this year there has been a lot of internal documentation, people that have been finding little clues inside of resumes from Googlers trying to change positions, lawsuit discovery. There's been a lot. And recently, this last week, there was a API documentation that got published onto GitHub that everyone is now pouring over, that was shared with us from some big names in the SEO industry. And so there's a lot that is being garnered and learned from that. The actual leak is what they're calling the Google API Content Warehouse. And so this GitHub has, I believe, 14,000 attributes that Google's able to look at as far as data points and things that they're collecting about visitors and usage, elements about the website. And so there's a lot to get into. There's some learnings, and then there's also things that Google themselves have told us that maybe have been to try and throw SEOs off the scent, or basically a lot of people are interpreting it as, hey, they're lying to us because they don't want this to be abused. And so...
Yeah, so before we dive in, well, let's tell you what this is and what this isn't. Today's podcast, we want to dive into something that actually came from Google that will clarify a lot of things for us as SEOs. Anybody that's trying to grow their business digitally through their website presence, this is going to be valuable for you. Now, what this isn't, right? All too often we hear SEOs say, oh, I've got an inside at Google, right? I know a guy, or I've seen things, or I have this
I've got a contact on the search team.
Right. Red flags for us generally. That is not what we're talking about today. What this is genuine leak of some of the things that Google is looking at that does confirm a lot of the things that we've already identified through our own tests and our own experience over the course of time. But then it's also given us some insight into other things that were debatable, that a lot of the SEO industry has been back and forth on, that we now have some pretty good clarification on, that we were doing anyway, but now we have some clarification.
Yeah, so as Quinn stated, this has not yet been confirmed by Google, but sleuths on the web have confirmed that it does appear to be part of Google's API references, and that it was mistakenly published by a bot. Now, this made news all over the place in the search industry late last week. However, it does appear that the actual leak happened at least 2 years ago, and so unsure how up to date or what changes have been made since this documentation was created, or if this is current, but we do have good indication that this is a legitimate data source leak.
And suffice it to say, we are going to talk about things that are actionable, things that you can take from this leak, things that are confirmed and clarified that will ultimately give you and other SEOs, other people that are trying to grow their business, direction on some opportunities that they can take advantage of.
Yeah, and I also want to, on this podcast, really clarify things that have been long-held beliefs by SEOs that Google had said, no, that isn't the case, that it appears that there is data to support that has been the case. Things like sandboxing for new websites, classifications for small personal sites. There's a lot there, which has often been used by SEOs as, hey, right now we just launched, we're in the sandbox. And then everyone has said, nope, it's confirmed there's no sandbox. They've told us there's no sandbox. And then here inside of their API documentation, we find notation for a sandbox. So that's just one example. And again, there are 14,000 data points. So it's a lot. And even though we're a few days since the leak, I think people have put a lot of time into going through and finding out what exactly is available. But I think we're going to continue to learn more from this as we go.
So let's dive into it. We've got the actual documentation here. Again, this is the Google API Content Warehouse, and there is a lot here to unpack. What I do want to say is, you guys, we're not trying to be the Dark Knight here. This isn't a Batman. We're uncovering Google. We like to think of ourselves as partners with Google. We want to play by the rules. We see, and our clients see, success from doing the right things, the best practices, doing it the good old-fashioned hard work way. And so what we're not doing here is we're not raising flags of how the behemoth Google is this or that, and here's a way to exploit them. This is absolutely best practices confirmed by the leak that we found here, and we just want to share that with you. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And there are things in this that do give some credence to techniques that black hat SEOs have been doing. That doesn't mean that when you're abusing some of these things that you won't get caught and have that give a negative impact. So one of those in particular is around click data. So this has been long speculated. So clear back, I don't even know how many years ago, Rand Fishkin kind of made a name for himself, not just from Moz, but he had tried a test where he went on Twitter and he said, hey, everyone do this search and then please click on my site. I want to see what happens. And with enough click data on a particular search keyword and seeing that users were clicking into that same site, then his ranking subsequently went up. And so everyone said, hey, this is a good indicator that click data is used. Some people are saying this is strictly to help identify trends so that when something's trending that Google can put the result that people are actually looking for towards the top. But there are a lot of black hat SEOs that use services from click farms to bots to do automated searches. And we know automated searches are directly listed in the spam guidelines from Google. So just because there's more insight to some of this data, it does not mean that we would recommend it. In fact, we would go as far as to say, do not do that and stay inside the guidelines, because if you're taking the time to invest in your own asset optimization of your website, putting that at risk is, it's a personal choice, but if you've got years and thousands of dollars into building out your online presence, why risk it?
All right, so the first point we want to talk about is Nav Boost.
Yeah, so Nav Boost initially became the naming convention behind what essentially is click and user data, where Google is using the clickstream data as specifically from Chrome as an indicator for positions and trends and helping Google to know which site is the best out of the list of 10 blue links that are there. So earlier this year, there was discovery, I believe they call it in legalese, from a DOJ case against Google. And in some of the testimony, they had talked about Nav Boost. And so that's how the naming for Nav Boost came out. And it has absolutely been confirmed by this leak. There is a lot of references to Nav Boost. And so that comes back to that point I was already talking about, where clickstream data is used, and it helps to score queries for intent. So they can take that data and say, yeah, this keyword and this page that's getting all the clicks, its intent is informational, even though they have a variety of top, middle, or bottom of funnel results, it appears to primarily be used as an informational query. So now they can use that to reflect across the rest of the results.
So ultimately, the takeaway here is what can we tell business owners as far as what we've confirmed, what they should be considering?
Yeah, so it goes back to number one, doing the best you can for click-through rate. And I know a lot of people have say, oh, meta descriptions don't actually impact where a site shows up, right? It helps with the snippet for users to determine which site to click on, but it's often overlooked and not given as much credence because going and making edits on your meta descriptions might not move the needle as far as position too much. Getting that and rich snippets and favicon and everything you can to take up as much of the screen as you can on your results is well worth the effort. So if you're getting those aggregate rating stars or site links or even a search box, anything that you can get as far as rich snippets, quality meta description, having a nice favicon and site name to really help your organic listing stand out is going to be time well spent. So that's probably one of the biggest takeaways. It also gives a little bit of credence to, making sure you are well represented in branded queries as well, because you want to be getting those clicks for your branded queries, and it makes those a little more important than maybe some people might have interpreted branded search to be because of how NavBoost plays a role. So one of the other things that is semi-related to NavBoost, but also blends into some other elements of SEO, is Google Chrome logged in user data. So the one piece of that we know Google has been using has been for Core Web Vitals, right? The Chrome user experience report has logged the loading of websites and how fast they load essentially for quite some time since the launch of Core Web Vitals. But now we're seeing that that is not the only source of data that's being used from Chrome browsers. And so, yeah, it falls into some of the NavBoost stuff, but there is also other history there that's being used to influence search results.
All right, so before we dive into more of what's in here specifically, let's talk a little bit about some of the, lies, right, that Google has put out to the industry that we can confirm are, in fact, untrue to some degree.
Yeah, so I think one of the first ones would be some of the spokespersons from Google, like John Mueller and Matt Cutts, have given us very specific what are now being interpreted as lies. Really you could probably analyze some of them as legalese or, so one of the big ones saying, we don't have anything like domain authority. That has been one of the big things that has been said from Google representatives. And I think a lot of people have just interpreted that as, well, yeah, domain authority is a Moz score, but clearly links matter. But those matter not just at the page level, but also at the entire site. So site-wide signals are confirmed from this link. And right now, that goes in direct opposition of what we've been told over the years. So it's something that I know the Google team has been trying to push away from, and I think that could be just industry jargon that has come to be about domain authority, but it's very clear in the leaks that PageRank, which is a score based off of links that come to your site, is still used, and links matter still very much.
This brings us back to the concept we just were talking about, and one of those lies in particular, or one of those at least misunderstandings we can chalk it up to, right? Is we don't use clicks for rankings.
Right. That's been widely represented by the search liaison team, that clicks are not a ranking signal. And we've seen both from the DOJ leaks. There's actually been leaks from a company called Project Veritas where they had some insider also correlation from these leaks from an internal resume that was posted on LinkedIn that specifically mentioned work on the NavBoost system, which is now all pointing back to clickstream data.
So these 2 points alone indicate, yes, you should be building valuable, credible backlinks. There's still value there. And that, in fact, clicks do have value. And so that click-through rate that we're talking about, getting people to your site does have impact on your site's potential to rank.
Absolutely.
Okay, and we brought this up as well. This brings us to the next misconception, is that there is no sandbox, right?
Right. So we've heard this directly from John Mew. There's screenshots of him saying this out there on Twitter, that there's no sandbox where a new website doesn't have the same capability to rank as well, especially in a competitive category, as a well-established site. And there's parameters and attributes inside the leak documents that point to the fact that, yes, there is a Google sandbox. And so when you're first starting out a brand new site, there is some time that needs to pass, and that doesn't mean that you stop working, but it can give you a clue as to, if you just launched your site, why you haven't gotten traction that first little bit.
Which I guess the takeaway there is persevere, right? Push through. If you're working with the SEO team, if you have an internal SEO or you're doing it yourself, keep going, because it does make a difference. There just is there's a time period, right, for that maturation. So.
Right, and we don't have the specifics on that, but working on your content and building your backlink footprint is going to help shorten that time regardless.
So then the next misconception we're going to talk about is, we don't use anything from Chrome for ranking.
Right. So this was previously said by Matt Cutts, the original Google search liaison that took us through our formative years as SEOs, and was absolutely a credit to the SEO community. However, this appears to be something that he has said, and reinforced by John Mueller as well, that they don't use anything from Chrome for ranking. Now, I always thought that was a weird thing to say to begin with, knowing that they use Crux data for Core Web Vitals. So it seemed like a really contraindicated statement right from the beginning. But now we're seeing, yes, they're using even more data from Chrome than previously thought for dwell time and long versus fast clicks. There's a lot of data that they're picking up.
Yeah, and this does jive with what we would expect. It seems silly that there would be a way to capture data that Google's not using in some way, shape, or form. So
right, exactly.
The next point that we want to talk about is it's kind of a rumbling around the internet whether or not we can trust what's coming from Google's spokespeople. And we have always had our hunch based off of our own experience, right? Somebody says something, it gets blown up in the SEO community. We know, because we're on the front lines of doing things and we know what has impact, we can take that with a grain of salt. We can kind of read between the lines, but so many don't. So can we trust Google liaisons? Can we trust spokespeople?
I think one of the things that happens is SEOs and the SEO community at large pores over every single word that these people are telling us, because everyone's eager for that edge in ranking their websites and their clients' websites, that what they say gets extrapolated. And it's kind of like that phone game where they say one sentence, and now by the time it's 5 articles later, that some of the meaning has been kind of added to what they said, more so than what they actually said. So
the takeaway is Obviously, we want to take any data that's coming from Google at any point and into consideration. But for good marketers, good people who are growing their business, the end all be all is your experience with the SERPs, with websites, trying things, iterating on them, and then obviously annotating those changes. So.
Right. And I think most SEOs appreciate that Google is at least speaking to SEOs. They give us good information in their developer docs, and they add new features that SEOs are able to take advantage of. And overall, their spam guidelines are good to follow because we've seen they have systems to capture those types of abuses. And so I think overall, we should continue to listen to the search liaison team and what they're telling us. And if something goes directly against your known experience, then you can take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, ultimately it's a symbiotic relationship, right? And it's always been that way, and it will continue to be that way. If you consider Google as the library, SEOs as the librarian, and website owners as the book authors, we have to work together. A library is no good without a good book, but what's a good book without a way to distribute that to its audience appropriately? So it's a symbiotic relationship. We have to play nice. We have to take our own experience into consideration and what's coming from Google themselves. All right, you guys, we've covered a lot. There is so much still to cover, and so we'll probably talk about this in future podcasts as well. But to finish us off today, what are the last couple of items that you want to bring up that were important from this leak?
Yeah, one that really stuck out to me is around domain age. And so that's been a wide held belief from SEOs for quite some time that domain age has an impact on rankings and trust, and something like changing the whois information and updating or transferring a domain can have an impact on that. And there does seem to be some truth from that that's garnered from these leaked documents, but overall, it's way too deep to get into in this short time. So Rand Fishkin and Mike King are the SEOs that originally broke this leak, and they've both got some great articles about it. We also want to share a copy of the leak docs that's been going around so that you can go and check out some of the values and attributes yourself. And that's probably the most we'll get into all of this today, but as you said, there's a lot here. We're going to continue to learn from this and probably talk about it again in the future.
Yeah, if you guys have questions about any of this, if you've come across a piece of documentation or somebody else's article that you've got a question or confusion about, leave us a comment. Let's talk about it. And if there's anything else that's major that we've missed, go ahead and let's have a conversation about that as well. There's a lot here, and we want to dive into it. And as always, we want to provide you with actionable insights that you can do to help grow your business. So with that, this has been RunLeadGen Radio. We are your go-to podcast for all things SEO and digital marketing for growing your business. Go ahead and like and subscribe so that you can stay up on all the latest things when it comes to growing your business. And we'll see you next time.